Meanwhile, President Trump's new communications director is putting White House leakers on notice. After Anthony Scaramucci's financial disclosure form appeared on Politico's website last night, Scaramucci tweeted that he'd be contacting the FBI and the Justice Department, calling the leak a felony. He ended that tweet, which has since been deleted, with a reference to Chief of Staff Reince Priebus. It led many to believe Scaramucci was blaming Priebus for the leak. Here's how Scaramucci addressed that controversy in an interview this morning.
He's the Chief of Staff. He's responsible for understanding and uncovering and helping me do that inside the White House, which is why I put that tweet out last night. When I put out a tweet and I put Reince's name in the tweet, they're all making the assumption that it's him because journalists know who the leakers are. So if Reince wants to explain that he's not a leaker, let him do that. But let me tell you something about myself. I am a straight shooter, and I'll go right to the heart of the matter.
Our Margaret Brennan is at the White House with more on the administration's attempt to crack down on leaks.
I know I'm in a cesspool called Washington, or a swamp called Washington, so it'll be virtually impossible to get rid of every leak, but I think we can take dramatic steps to get rid of leaks.
6 days after being named White House Communications Director, Anthony Scaramucci says he's getting closer to rooting out the leakers.
One of the big problems here that I'm discovering in the comms team is that senior people are really the guys doing the leaking, and they ask junior people to leak for them.
Hours after that interview, Scaramucci was sitting down with his interviewer and the president at the White House for a private dinner. Late last night, Scaramucci claimed he himself had become the target of a leak. On Twitter, Scaramucci posted that he would, quote, contact the FBI and Justice Department since his financial forms were released. He called it a felony, which it's not, and seemed to link it to White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus. But those forms were filed with the Office of Government Ethics and are publicly available. A Politico article yesterday shows a former Wall Street investor is holding assets worth as much as $85 million. After midnight, Scaramucci deleted his original tweet and clarified his post as public notice to leakers that all senior administration officials are helping to end illegal leaks.
I've told people that if there's a civil war and people are fighting internally, we have to dial that down.
Leaks have been a focus for President Trump since the start of his administration. Scaramucci was chosen by the president to, among other things, target those leaks.
We're as strong as our weakest leak. But if you're going to keep leaking, I'm going to fire everybody.
CBS News White House and Foreign Affairs correspondent Margaret Brennan joins me now from the White House. So, Margaret, we should sort of underline this point that you brought up in your piece, that the release of those financial forms, Anthony Scaramucci's financial forms, it's not a leak, it's not a felony anyways, because it's publicly available information. You would think he would know that, but he characterized it like a criminal action. So what can we read into this and how it unfolded?
Well, as you heard, the communications director, Anthony Scaramucci, who informed us this morning that he is now officially on the job, no longer waiting until August to be on staff here, he characterized this as a civil war. He said this is about the senior staff at the White House leaking damaging information, putting damaging information about the president and the internal workings of the White House out there. So he is pointing the finger, without naming names, chiefly at some of the fellow senior advisors to the President of the United States. This is Game of Thrones. This is Civil War. This is the kind of office politics that really detract and distract from the president's own agenda. But interestingly, as a choice, strategically, they've decided to put it out there. And so in many ways, this appears to be positioning for other changes to come, perhaps in staffing. Reince Priebus, the chief of staff here to President Trump since day one, who was head of the RNC, really helpful to the president in building a Republican platform, that hostile takeover, as many describe it, of the Republican Party that Donald Trump staged, pushing out more traditional Republican candidates. He is now at the center of this storm. You heard senior White House advisors failing to defend him. And in fact, Anthony Scaramucci said Reince Priebus should come out and defend himself, speak for himself here if he is not the source of these leaks. So this is dirty laundry being aired in the public, and we're telling you about it.
Yeah, indeed. It was the inclusion of Reince Priebus's Twitter handle that fueled a lot of the speculation. And yeah, you heard Scaramucci basically say, well, the reason you guys think, you know, Reince is responsible for the leaks is maybe because you're the journalist and you know who's leaking. He definitely didn't defend him, even though he deleted that tweet. But can we talk a little bit more about the nature of their relationship? I know when Sean Spicer announced that he was stepping down, we learned a little more about what's happening inside the White House and how Reince felt about the hiring of Scaramucci.
Right. Well, Sean Spicer, the former, well, I guess he's still technically on staff, or he was supposed to be until mid-August and still coming to work here at the White House, had worked previously with the RNC and very closely with Chief of Staff Reince Priebus, as I said, who previously ran the RNC, the Republican National Committee. And so they came in as part of that operation that helped President Trump get elected. But you also had some of the Trump loyalists who were in from day one or loyal first to the president and not to the Republican Party per se. And as you've heard White House officials describe it, there's a divide between these two camps, as they see it at least, within the functioning of this White House. And so there is already that dynamic, but add on to that what we have previously reported here in terms of Anthony Scaramucci, who helped President Trump in terms of fundraising, was an advocate and a surrogate for him out there on television shows in particular, advocating for Trump to become the president of the United States. He had been offered various jobs within this administration, but had not ever come on staff until just about 6 or 7 days ago when he was offered this communications director job by the president himself. And there is some bad blood there because there is the perception, rightly or wrongly, that the chief of staff to the president was blocking Anthony Scaramucci from coming on staff here. That is the perception, that is the impression. And today on another network, Anthony Scaramucci gestured to some of that and saying, you know, there's been opposition research on me for months. What he's saying in that is that there are people out to get him and to keep him from doing his job. And so that's part of the dynamic there. When he also said the dynamic between he and Reince Priebus are like two brothers, but then made a comparison to Cain and Abel, of course, those biblical characters who ended up killing each other, and not necessarily a brotherly relationship here where they're on the same page, pulling in the same direction. He is all but saying that the two camps are at war here.
Yeah, indeed. I don't think he did much to settle any sort of curiosity that we may have watching this all unfold.
And this is deliberate. This is deliberate.
Right.
Don't think that this is just a mistake on Twitter. There is this deeply held belief, rightly or wrongly, that there are camps within the White House who, though they are serving the president, aren't serving him well, or perhaps trying to compete with each other and leaking information about each other. So while there was the firing of a lower level staffer in the communications shop, they're quickly moving on to some of the bigger fish here in terms of laying responsibility.
Margaret, that's a really good thing to point out. You know, you listen to Scaramucci's talk, and he's very sort of plain spoken, a little loose. One might think that he's kind of talking off the top of his head, but he's not. There is something very deliberate in what he has to say. Margaret Brennan at the White House. Thank you so much, Margaret.